Hello, welcome back. I'm John. I have 4 books to share with you today, and one of them wasn't very good, and the other 3 were pretty good. One is nonfiction, the rest are fiction. One is a collection of short stories, the other 2 are novels. So I'm going to go over them in, I believe, the order I read them in. So the first one we won't have to spend a whole lot of time on. It wasn't particularly good. It is The Coffin Ship by Peter Tonkin, and it's kind of a convoluted plot. So, I'm not even exactly sure how to explain this one. There is a giant uh, oil tanker. It's huge. It's the biggest in the world at the time, and we are led in from the very beginning, the very first page. There is some kind of plot going on in this ship. The crew, one of them has gotten drunk and blabs that he has put a bomb in the ship. It's down where all these different pipes converge, and he's not supposed to tell anyone, or nobody else was supposed to know, something like that. This is a very convoluted plot. So the other crew members freak out because there's not supposed to be a bomb. They're just supposed to apparently sink the ship. And they go down into this section of the ship with all these pipes, and they screw up, and there's a spark, and the doors slam closed, and it pumps all this neutral gas into the space so the ship won't blow up, and they all die, including the captain and a bunch of the crew. And so from that point on, there's no crew, and the owner of the ship calls a guy named, I want to say his name is Richard Mariner. Okay, I don't really remember it. Like I said, this was not a particularly great book. He calls a guy named Richard Mariner, who is a sort of disgraced captain. He's running a crew finding agency in London. So at any time of the day, he'll get a call from ships all over the world and say, I need a master electrician, I need a captain or an executive officer, and he'll put them on a plane and fly them out there from anywhere in the world. Pretty interesting, actually. And I read a book about that one time, but I can't remember the name of it right now. I've read a couple of books about that subject, come to think of it. Not just that subject, but shipping. And the reason Richard Mariner is a disgraced captain is that he had married, he was already going to go to sea. He married the daughter of the owner of a shipping corporation that he was captain for, and she was really howdy and cheated on him constantly, and he didn't know it because he was off at sea. And her younger sister tells him, and they had this quarrel, and they try to work it out, and her father builds a ship called the Rowena, which is her name, and on the maiden voyage, it's not his fault. It's not the captain's fault. The ship wrecks into another ship and explodes and kills Rowena, who was cheating on him earlier in the day, and he walked in on it. But it was not his fault. He didn't do it intentionally. It was another ship, another captain's fault. And so he just quit. And, well, so anyway, they need a captain and a crew for this ship where everybody else has died. And they call him up. The owner calls him, and he cannot find a captain, so he decides to go himself. And when his sister-in-law, ex-sister-in-law, finds out, so her father has bought a bunch of oil that's in the tanker, and as the owner of the cargo, she can go on board, but she is also a qualified executive officer, or maybe third mate, something like that. And so he's surprised to see her, and of course she's in love with him and always has been, and he felt like he picked the wrong sister. And so you have your romance there, and on top of that, some of the members of the crew that did survive We're not sure which ones of them are in on this or were planning to sink the ship. But there's a saboteur, specifically a saboteur on board who is taking out other members of the crew who get in his way. And we're not let in on who that is, but I had a pretty good idea of who it was from the beginning. And the tension in this book goes up and down and up and down and up and down over and over and over. It's very frustrating. It's supposed to be like an epic voyage from like the Persian Gulf down around Africa, around the Cape, and back up and into one of the Scandinavian countries. There's a really big port. Wasn't Rotterdam. Anyway, so people are falling off the ship. At one point, the chief of the engine room pushes the captain off the ship, and he falls over, which I don't know if he'd have survived that, to be honest. And then he puts down a lifeboat and goes and saves him, and they save this other guy who fell off, and they're not friends, but the captain doesn't do anything. And then at one point they're all poisoned, and they all get really bad like food poisoning, and they have to, this is in the middle of a hurricane or something, like a huge storm, and they have to intern the ship in South Africa, and there's like an oil embargo. This is from the late 80s. So, the world has kind of united in putting these embargoes on South Africa because of apartheid, and they can't get oil. So, there's some things that go on there, and all the while the captain has his suspicions, and this romance between his ex-sister-in-law and him is heating up, and people keep getting killed. At one point they leave the ship because the ship, part of the ship blows up, and they leave and they get in lifeboats and they float around for several days, and then they go, hey, look, there's our ship. And they get back on the ship, and then they continue on their voyage. It wasn't very good. I mean, there were parts of it that were done well. A lot of this is told in flashbacks too, or like we get to a point and then we hear about what happened, and that's really frustrating because Peter Tonkin could have just told us what was happening as it happened, and it would have been a more active story rather than a passive story. I feel like I'm talking really fast. Yeah, but I kind of want to get through this one. Okay, so that is the Coffin ship, and I'm not going to tell you what happens in the end or who the bad guy was or anything like that. There are multiple, and the up and down tension continues until the very last page. Not that good. It was entertaining, but it just wasn't that great. So the next book I read was a collection edited by Ellen Datlow and Lisa Morton. It's called Haunted Nights, and this is a collection of Halloween themed stories, or some of them are Halloween, some of them are sort of like pagan holidays that have carried over into modern times. And there's a Dia de los Muertos story that was really good in this. I really enjoyed that. In fact, it may have been my favorite in the entire collection. I was kind of wary of this because I've read several of Ellen Datlow's collections over the years, and they tend to be sort of PG-13. And I tend to like horror stories that go there, that aren't holding back, less than the Ray Bradbury sort of tradition. But as I get older, I think I have come to appreciate those kinds of stories more than I did when I was younger. And I really enjoyed this. So some of the stories that I liked, so Stephen Graham Jones has a story in this called Dirtmouth. And I'm not always the biggest Stephen Graham Jones fan. I've read a few of his stories over the years and a book of his. And some of his stories tend to be ambiguous to the point of I didn't really understand what was going on. If I'm remembering them correctly, it's been a while. It was in one of the best new horror anthologies from something like 15 years ago. So probably not up to date on that, am I? Uh, and his book, um, I cannot remember the name of that book off the top of my head. It was a little short book. Something Mapping the Interior. Was that the name of it? Mapping the Interior. I I I liked that, but I don't think that I understood it. But that was years ago also. I read that not too long after it came out. Uh, the story in this book is called Dirtmouth. It's about a man who has two infants. They're about a year old. I think one is 2 and one is 1. And his wife was suffering from postpartum depression. And the way that she dealt with it, she was a very active person. And she dealt with it by going mountain climbing. And she fell and died. And her body was washed away in this river and never found. And in the wake of this, there was like a big TV movie about it, and the husband has made a little bit of money so he can take some time off. Um, and he's really, I mean, he's very devastated because it came out of the blue, and he really loved his wife, and he hasn't really had he hasn't had time to spend with his kids since it happened. And uh, their grandparents, not his wife's parents, they own a cabin in the same mountain range where the wife died. And he takes his kids up there to this cabin. A snowstorm is starting. And in the middle of this, there is a knock on the door. And he opens the door, and it's his wife. And he lets her in, and she can't talk. And he is overjoyed. He doesn't want to explain it. He doesn't care what's happening. He's just glad that she is there. But it becomes apparent that she is rapidly decomposing. And he's talking to her and sort of putting his own ideas of what is going on into this situation. And he becomes convinced that she's pregnant again, which is not possible, but he thinks he doesn't really know what's going on, but he thinks that he needs to help her give birth. And he gets up to go into the kitchen for something like a knife or something, and when he comes back, his wife and his kids are gone. And it is all done through him. This is a conversation that he is having, like a monologue with the police, explaining to them what happened. And he says, I know you won't believe me, but this is absolutely what happened. And in a few years, you're going to get reports of like that the kids were in these costumes for Halloween. And like one was a caterpillar and the other was, I don't remember, but you're going to get reports that there is a giant caterpillar and et cetera, et cetera. It was really, really interesting. And I thought it was really well done. I don't think I did it justice in that explanation. Let's see what else here. There's a story by Garth Nix, which is called The 17-Year Itch. It is about a patient at an asylum who is very itchy all the time. And every 17 years, he's in this asylum of his own choosing. Every 17 years, he gets into a padded sphere and locks himself in it, or has himself locked in it, and he spends all of Halloween night in this sphere. And we are seeing this story through the eyes of, at first, an orderly who's been there for a long time, and then through a doctor who is kind of a disgrace, and he's sort of a drug addict or something, or an alcoholic really bad. But they are fine with it. They don't see any problem with it. And the patient seems very, very adamant that this has to happen, because if it doesn't happen, whatever's in him will get out. There's a new director of the asylum, and she does not want to let this patient into this sphere. It's all in his head, this isn't helping. This is only prolonging his illness, and I know everything. And they don't lock him in the sphere, and the story is about the consequences of that. I thought that was pretty good. There's a story called A Flicker of Light on Devil's Night by Kate Jones. And this was a very realistic story about a Halloween where a woman, she's living in a slum, a really crappy apartment. She doesn't have any money, and her kids and her situation are driving her crazy. Her son in particular is really trying to rebel, and he's gross, and she just can't take it anymore, and she snaps. I thought that was really good, and that was a realistic story. That wasn't like a horror story so much as just sometimes people can't take it anymore kind of story. I'll just do a couple more here. There was a really good one called All Through the Night by Elise Fourier-Eddy, and this takes place in the 1800s in the Five Points of New York. It's about an Irish couple. They immigrate to the United States. The husband becomes like a drunk and gets beat to death in the street, and then the wife is on her own, and she's pregnant, and she gives birth, and she meets a man in a bakery or something, and he offers to buy her daughter, and she thinks that he is well, in Irish mythology, right, there are, I guess they're kind of like fairies in a way, but they will come and they will take your baby and replace it with a changeling. And she thinks that he is one of those, and she refuses, and but it turns out that she takes his payment by accident somehow. He pays her with a gem. And she gives birth, and she's living in this tenement with all these other people in one room, and she has to work for this man, and he's terrible and mistreats them and overworks them and everything. And she has to leave her daughter with a neighbor girl, and someone convinces her to feed the little girl with cow's milk and all this, and it's the 5 Points, so it's basically like water with paint in it. And the daughter gets very sick and dies, and the mother is convinced that the man has come and taken her daughter and changed it with a changeling, and she goes on a hunt for him, and it sort of goes into another dimension of the 5 Points, but we don't know if she actually goes into another dimension or if she is just having a mental breakdown. And I thought that was really good. I think that may have been, honestly, the best story in this book as far as that goes. Let's see. And the longest story, well, the one about Dia de los Muertos is A Kingdom of Sugar Skulls and Marigolds by Eric J. I'm not entirely sure. I didn't do a very good job of writing that down. Let me see. Guinard? I'm not, what's the word? Is it right here? Right? I don't know how to pronounce that, so forgive me. That is really interesting. It's a beautiful, it has all the imagery of Dia de los Muertos and the sugar skulls and everything. And it's a young man, and he is having this terrible depression. He's drinking a lot, and his grandmother was kind of a witch kind of, and he really, really misses his friend who was murdered. And he recites some words out of his book, and he puts a name on the sugar skull, and he passes out drunk. And when he wakes up, the sugar skull is come to life. And his father is in the other room. This magic has worked, right? And they go on a trip to the cemetery to see his best friend, and we gradually become aware of what happened. And everything is different. They're in this kind of different dimension where the sky is a different color and everything is different. Like his car is beautiful, and everything is very interesting. There's flowers everywhere. And we come to find that his friend was murdered, and there's a reason that his friend was murdered. And when they get to the cemetery, the people, it's like a gang, and they are there, and it's about how his family helps him and accepts him, and also how I can't remember the name, but there's like this lord of the underworld who comes up and helps. Uh, and his grandmother comes back, and it was really a good story. I really liked that. I thought it was a very, very nice story. And the longest story is by John Langan. It's called Lost in the Dark, and it's written in a realistic fashion. So it's an interview between. Okay, so it's billed as an interview between John Langan and a filmmaker that he taught in school, and she has created this film, and it's become a really big hit. There have been multiple sequels, and it's called Bad Agatha. And so it is about John Langan interviewing this director, and a discussion of a behind the scenes interview she did with some of the other people who made the movie, where she revealed that it was based on something that actually happened, and it was based on something that actually happened in real life years ago. So there was a report of this woman who was taken off a train in the middle of the mountains and into a mine with a couple of nuns and some police, and or something like that. And afterwards, it was different. There were two guys and some nuns, and they take this woman into a cave, and she is either in a nightgown or she's in a straitjacket. And there are multiple witnesses who say different things, and a policeman comes up there to see what's going on, and there are two dead guys in the cave, and everybody else is gone. And then later, there's a guy who goes missing in the cave, a teenager. They're up there partying, and he goes in there, and the same police officer has to go in there, and this is years later, and he finds him finally, but he also finds a drawing on the wall of what will become Bad Agatha. And the both of them are kind of convinced that there is someone else in this cave mine. It's a cave and a mine. So part of it is a mine, part of it is just a natural cave. And then the filmmakers go there to make a documentary about this subject. And they get sort of lost in these mines. And one of them, who has been doing a college project on the Bad Agatha thing, on the real event, she wanders off. And then the movie is based on them in this mine with the background. So it's sort of like, oh, good Lord, what was that movie that came out in '99? I remember when it came out, my grandpa said it was really stupid because you just watch this whole movie and then at the end nothing happens. The Blair Witch Project. I rather like the Blair Witch Project. I didn't care for any of the sequels. But anyway, so it's an interview between John Langan and the director, and maybe he comes to realize that everything is not as it seems. I didn't particularly think that it was well done, and I think that it might have been better as just a straightforward story of them going down into the mine, to be completely honest with you. But since we are now at something like 20 minutes, maybe longer, I think I'm going to cut this video in two, and I will make a part 2. And the other two books are, if you would like to join me in the next video, Self-Analysis by Karen Horney and Red Dragon by Thomas Harris. And I'll do Red Dragon first because I know that's what most people would be interested in. So I want to thank you for joining me in this video, and I'll see you in the next one.